and attracting board members who understand the business and economics of a school district, not just the political stuff that can get us kind of in a downward spiral. So I really want to give them some acknowledgement and credit. And so with that, I'd like to see if Dr. Goodwin could come up and share with us some stuff.
Good morning, Vice President Gore.
Good morning.
Nice seeing you again. We had the pleasure of your company at one of our schools and fellow and other board members. You know, I could go through a lot of what's happened in the past 10 and a half, 11 months. I think it's been a surprise what had transpired and how these kids were not a priority, and that's been probably the most frustrating thing. But now to see so many people step up and bring out the good that we have going on at Murphy. First off, it started with PCDIC. They were the first organization that stepped up, and they, through Kim Owens, brought in $150,000, and that paid for the first 2 years of the Science Center curriculum, field trips, also them doing professional development with our staff. We've actually reinstituted professional development, which had been turned off for 3 years at the district. And so we have 1 day district and 3 days building wides. Next year we're going to do 2 and 2 because we're actually bringing in new math and ELA curriculum. The old curriculum was not very effective, and frankly it was above a lot of the teachers and the students' abilities at that point. One of the things that when Member Burton came out to visit, the Ed Center had not been used as an Ed Center or community center for years and actually been pushed away. And so last Wednesday we actually held a community family connect night, and we actually had 22 vendors bringing in for some financial support, legal, immigration support, medical and dental. And it was just really nice. Councilman Narducci was there with his staff. So it was just a very positive environment, which is what we actually wanted the Ed Center to be set up for. United Way Valley of the Sun has adopted Murphy, which is really cool. Sorry. Sorry. Dozens of companies and organizations are now coming into Murphy, bringing donations. Probably the funnest thing that I got to see, nothing personal to your visit, but Big Red from the Cardinals came in last week, and the kids would absolutely blitz. It's tough to compete against them. Even when they had a couple Cardinal cheerleaders, they were ignored. Everybody went nuts when they saw Big Red. But they donated $5,000 to each one of our school as a result of their touchdown program. I can go on and on. Valley of the Sun has just been phenomenal. They keep bringing things in. We have different groups coming in doing beautification of our campuses. One book is being donated to every single child from Valley Metro. That is going on this week. So I hate to not list everybody that's going on, but it is turned out to be very positive. And I realize we still have some months we're getting over, but there's a lot of really good things going on at Murphy. And I really want everybody to know that we are progressing. The kids as our focus. I'm hoping next year that is our sole focus. My desire is that everybody that works at Murphy, their one purpose and their one focus of being there is the kids. Not themselves, not the career, not a stepping stone, but for the kids. And that's what they deserve, and that's what we need to get back to. So thank you for asking me allowed to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Goodwin. That's fantastic.
Vice President.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, Mr. Vice President and Madam Superintendent, members. I love Murphy, and thank you for loving it also. I see you get choked up, and those are the kind of people that are going to be needed to turn that around. Dr. Donofrio, been there forever. Wonderful, wonderful man. So just want to say thank you. Thank you all the people who've been out there and who love Murphy.
With that, I will look for a motion to approve item 3F.
So moved.
Thank you.
A second.
And a second. Any other comments or discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 President Narducci is beating you to the punch there, Dr. Chang. Any opposed?
I know, my mute button.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passed, and we will move on to the general session, which begins with a call to the public. Director Williams, have we received any requests to speak?
President Corr, we have not received any requests to speak for this agenda item.
Fantastic. Then we will move on to item 5A. Director Williams?
Vice President Corr, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Item 5A is a presentation, discussion, and possible approval and adoption of the ELP standards for implementation. Let me just turn my page here. I believe Ms. Kate Wright will be presenting on this agenda item, the one and only.
The good of all. Good morning. President Narducci, Vice President Corr, Superintendent Hoffman, and members of the board. It's my pleasure to be here this morning to give you, I think, our final update on the ELP standards, the public comment results, and then to talk about possible adoption and approval by the state board. So just a quick review of our timeline. This project started in 2017. We have had a lot of participation both from the field, from our public, and then also from our experts in the EL field nationally to support this project. We are now at the bottom row of our timeline, which is a relief. We are in May, and I'm here to ask for to request adoption by the State Board of Education. So just a quick update on our public comment. Public comment was open from April 1st to April 30th. We sent the request for public comment through our OLS Pell list, which is our practitioners of English learners. There's actually about 1,000 members in that group. Public comment was solicited there. We also put it on our social media, and Expect More Arizona, who's a partner with us in our work for English learners, also sent it to their notification list. As of when this PowerPoint was created, we had a total of about 102 relevant public comments. When we closed, we had about 129 public comments that were related to the standards. This I can update as well. So I just broke down where our public comment came from and the feedback so that you kind of understand where the feedback we were receiving. We also had feedback from the north in Flagstaff and Humboldt after the 16th. We had wide feedback in Central Arizona, and you can see from the list of LEAs that we had both charters, elementary, and high school participation. One of the things we found in the feedback is that a lot of our LEAs actually had professional learning opportunities around the standards. So we would get a series of public comments from the same LEA the same afternoon. I could picture they were, sitting at tables looking through it, and then their exit ticket was public comment, which was helpful. And so we've received a lot of public comment that way, and I liked to be able to see the correlation of comments there. So again, you can see we had pretty wide participation in our Maricopa area, and then we had a lot of public comment from the South. And Crane was one of our districts that did professional learning around the standards, so we received a lot of feedback there. So we were pleased with the depth and breadth of the comments that we received. The PowerPoint continues to just share kind of an overview of the kinds of standards comments that we received. People tended to think that the layout was much easier to read. They liked that there was a direct correlation to the ELA standards. There was a lot of comment that the fact that they were broad was helpful, so that it would allow for them to plan, to co-teach, and to work together with their grade level partners in the field. They also felt like the breakdown of the standards is different. They're no longer broken down by domain. They're actually broken down by the types of communication, so receptive, productive, and interactive. There was feedback that was more intuitive and would be easier to correlate into lesson plans. And then, again, feedback that these standards really help to align to curriculum that the schools were using in their mainstream classrooms, and that they felt like they could use them with their current curriculum adoptions. And included in the standards are instructional supports that are a new addition. There was feedback that was helpful, and that there was a belief that the standards would help to bridge the gap, our achievement gap, because they were so closely aligned with content standards. So as just a general overview, the general feedback from the field is that the new English proficiency standards are more concise, better organized, aligned to the ELA standards, more intuitive, easier to use for planning, and reflective to really how language is used and what students will be expected to do when they're in mainstream classrooms. When we received concerns, they tended to be around these concepts. The Reading Foundation standards are a separate document to the K-12 standards. So they live outside of because they're not separated by domain, they live in a separate document. They're very robust and in-depth, but teachers will have to be trained to know that the reading foundations are where phonics, decoding, and general foundational reading lives. That is in line with national standards. So we actually have modeled California standards and the other CCSSO standards in that practice. There was a lot of conversation around the depth of professional learning that will be required, and that is not a surprise and really typical. And I would be concerned more if that weren't mentioned. You know, this is a really big shift in transition, so there was recognition that we will need to be providing professional development and that there needs to be time for teachers to get used to teaching in this way. And that we're happy about that because we actually have 2 full years for transition, which we believe will be really helpful. So the expectation this year is that teachers will start to become introduced and familiar with the standards, but not that they will begin the year implementing the standards. So we were able to address some of that concern with just our timeline, that we have time for professional development and time for teachers to get accustomed to the new standards. Then there was feedback that they felt as if resources, additional supports that lived outside of the standards would be helpful in regards to professional development. And we have teachers who will be working with us June 10th through the 13th to start building those resource guides. So we're happy that we were able to address those concerns in that way. And as much as teachers were happy that the standards were broad, there was some concern that they were broad. You know, so it's going to take some time to unpack the standards and really learn how to build lesson plans around the standards. But none of that is a concern that is unusual when you're looking at new standards. So overall, 83% of the comments were positive. 17% of the comments either suggested a concern, which I listed on the previous slide, or a suggestion, like a typo, like there's a number that's being repeated in the wrong grade level or something to that effect. So where it was a correction that had been recommended, those corrections have been made. Any suggestion that was alignment oriented was also looked at with our expert group and adjusted. If there were some suggestions, for example, that really aligned better with supports, so in those cases a change was not made to the actual standard, but a note was taken that there will be a piece in the resource guide to address that additional piece of information so teachers have it. And to be very frank, most of the comments were around phonics, and the Reading Foundations actually met the need of those concerns. Next steps. So beyond requesting that the State Board of Education today adopt and approve our new standards, then over the course of next school year, we are introducing, rolling out, and training. And that is really going to be the focus of our work. And we will expect that teachers will be transitioning to new standards in 2020-21. And then we will be adjusting our assessment in 2021, 2022 to align to the new standards. And that's the update. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have about the standards or our process.
Any questions? Yeah, please.
Vice President Corr, Superintendent Hoffman, members, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm really excited to see where this will lead into the future. I'm curious to see, it says it was reviewed by EL experts, including West Ed. I was wondering who some of those additional EL experts are. I know in the past we've had professors and different people. And then the other question I had following up to that was there alignment between their feedback as well as the feedback received from our school districts and what were maybe the high-level points? And I'm assuming they all got addressed.
Yes. Yes, Vice President Corr, Superintendent Hoffman, Member Mack. So West Ed was our partner in this work. So they were our partner from the beginning to the end in reviewing. We also contracted with a consultant through CCSSO. Her name is Adine Sato. She is a renowned expert. She actually was the lead on the alternate ELP standards, which were formatted based on these standards. She did a robust review for us, and she's still on contract for the resource guide. So she will continue to support our work in looking at the resources and making sure that they support the standards. So we did have university feedback in that our EL Advisory Council in our last meeting had the opportunity to review the standards and that work. So in that group, we have NAU, ASU, and U of A, plus GCU. So we solicited their feedback as well as our other stakeholders. Yeah, and yes, West Ed worked with us post feedback review, and so anything that was addressed that was beyond feedback they had already provided to us has been resolved.
Thank you.
Yes, and we will continue to lean heavy on West Ed and our consulting partners to make sure that implementation is effective.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the attached updates? Nope, wrong one. Do I have a motion to adopt the revised English language proficiency standards?
So moved.
Second.
That was close. I'm going to make an executive decision and say I think it was Member Wellborn. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nicely done, Dr. Chang. Any opposed? Hearing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Item 5B. Dr. Williams?
Vice President Core. Oh, there he is. I got a little nervous. I thought I would have to be presenting this one.
He likes to make a dramatic entrance
I know.
before
He's
his
like,
part.
and here I am. Vice President Core, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Item 5B is the updates to the technical guidance, policies, and procedures regarding menu of assessments in the 1920 school year. And Deputy Director Baden will be taking you through that document this morning.
Very good. Catcher?
Yes. Vice President Core, Superintendent Hoffman, and members. I think I might actually go up to the lectern so I can swap out.
Sure.
I can't just hunker down on my table now. So I'll just stay up here. So if you recall, at the last board meeting, we introduced a few items that the board would have to revisit as a result of sort of the shift of menu of assessments. So previously, before that communication from the feds, we were under the understanding that the menu of assessments would be in lieu of the statewide assessment. And so there were certain policies and procedures and guidelines that the board adopted in order to make sure that that aligned to state requirements and federal requirements. As a result of that recent communication with the feds, that is not the case anymore. Those assessments will no longer be in lieu of the statewide assessment, and we're just talking about the high school level. 3.8 has essentially been tabled indefinitely until we get any sort of updated communication from the feds or until ESSA is reauthorized and the language is modified. So as a result of that, we introduced a few items at the last board meeting that said staff was going to work with stakeholders in the department on some updated changes to those guidance. And in that time since the last board meeting and now, we have done that. And so I just want to run through it very briefly with you here. To get an idea of what we're looking at. Really, there were two things that were the guiding, principles, you could say, when staff was working on this with stakeholders and with the department, and that is that the menu of assessments in the next 2 years is going to serve two purposes. One is that there is inherent value in offering those assessments to high school students, and so we want to ensure that we try to provide avenues and flexibility to LEAs to take advantage of that. But the second is also with the understanding that this is going to ramp up to full implementation in that 21-22 school year in alignment with the 5-year assessment plan. So we were trying to balance the access that can be provided through the menu of assessments, which is an optional menu in the next 2 years, with getting prepared for fully implementing this. And that would come with all of those rules and requirements that we were originally planning for, but have now since freed up. So those are the bullet points here on some of the things that are changing. Some of them are not. If they're not changing, then it would say things like continue. That's continued guidance of what we had previously issued. I think one thing that I want to hit on with board members is that this is not necessarily the document that's going to go out to the field. This was just for our digestion to see what we're looking at. ADE has more robust guidance. That's everything assessment related. The board doesn't necessarily adopt each and every granular level of guidance, but we're going to work with them after this to to incorporate it into a much more readable document and comprehensive one for the field. The other thing to keep in mind is after the board adopts this, hopefully the board adopts, we're going to work with ADE on getting the portal, the notification portal that we had last year. We're going to use that same portal, getting this information out to the field, and having that July 1 notification deadline, which is, again, a continuation of what we had last year. As to the actual policies, there's a couple that I'll hit on. Obviously, the first bullet point, we're eliminating or modifying anything that's in conflict with the communication from the feds. So member Mac brought up a good example at the last board meeting, which was ACT was able to be used in lieu of AIM Science in this current school year. That is not going to be the case in the next 2 school years. That's just one example of something that, is going to have to be taken out. Another is that the testing windows. So for the current school year, we essentially had 2 testing windows. We had one testing window for what we sort of assumed are end-of-course-esque assessments, and that was essentially the whole school year. And that was because those students are taking those assessments when they're ready, and we were very flexible for them. Now, nobody selected those assessments in this school year, so we didn't really see how that worked out. And then for the summative assessments, we had a testing window from like March to the end of the school year. So the proposal here is to just have one testing window and have it from February 3rd through May 29th. That gives a little more flexibility to those folks who are choosing the summative assessments. That's ACT and SAT. But it's going to eliminate this potential for testing the whole school year. And again, this goes back to the balance. We wanted to be flexible for LEAs because we want to provide access to students, and we think that there's value in that. But we also understand that when we go to full implementation in the 21-22 school year, we can't have year-round testing. So we wanted to try to ramp that up in a way that made sense. And then the other thing, 2 other points that I wanted to point out is the third bullet point, I probably should have numbered these, is who needs to take these assessments. So for the current school year, we instituted the same 95% testing requirement. Once you fall under that, there's accountability implications. For the next 2 school years, there won't be the same implications and there aren't the same federal requirements. However, if an LEA is selecting this assessment for all of their high school students in each high school, then we feel that they should be administering it to all of those students, and especially if the state's picking up the tab. However, there won't be the same accountability implications if they fail to do so. And then the bullet point just under there is this lock-in requirement. If you remember, we had required LEAs, if they selected an assessment from the menu, they had to administer that for 3 years unless the board granted them an exemption. We went back and forth on this one with stakeholders, both in the field and otherwise, about what the best path forward here was. I think the general agreement and why it's recommended here to remove that lock-in requirement is that the LEAs that selected this current school year did so under the assumption that this would be in lieu of the statewide assessment. And so we didn't feel like the default policy should be that they were automatically required to continue to administer that for 2 additional years if they didn't want to. There was also an understanding that if we locked in folks for 3 years, as was the existing policy, that takes us into the full implementation year, and things will be different then. And then the final consideration was that there are some assessments like SAT that are not currently on the contract for the menu of assessments, meaning that there are not statewide dollars going to that assessment in the upcoming school year. And so that'll be an additional option in 2 years. And so if we lock in LEAs who maybe want to choose that assessment, they would have to wait or ask for an exemption. So rather than treating these all on a case-by-case basis, we just are recommending taking that lock-in requirement out. So that are some of the highlights. Like I said, this is not encompassing of all guidance, but these are the things that the boards has adopted previously, and so we wanted to revisit it for probably the next 2 years. This is at least for the next school year, but we didn't want to back the board into a corner. If there's something that needs to be revisited for that second year, you can always come back and look at it then. So with that, I'm going to go back to my seat because I'm feeling the pressure now.
You're handling it just fine. Why don't you stay there and see if we have any questions? Are there any questions for Deputy
Like
Director
a newly
Baden?
married man. I don't know. It's a new presence.
Well, sitting at the table, I'm gesticulating a lot more up here. That's just not.
Superintendent Hoffman.
Vice President, core members of the board. First, I just wanted to say how much the department really appreciates the collaboration on this with the board staff. So thank you so much for continuing to work with us so in such detail, and we just really appreciate being a partner in this. And then I was just curious, since we approved the 5-year plan, I was wondering if in conversations with legislators or with the governor's department, if there have been more discussions around whether or not the state intends to pay for the 11th grade tests that are menu type tests.
Yes, Vice President Core Superintendent Hoffman, before I answer, you mean for the next 2 years, if that is something?
For all future years.
Okay, so it's a good question, and I think we have had a lot of discussions back to this, to the point about collaboration. A lot of this we worked on with department, with assessment staff, and with policy staff. And the understanding that we have right now is that as a result of the board's action for reducing that high school testing to just one test in 10th grade, that results in savings from that contract. And if the legislature this week, hopefully, passes a budget that is the baseline appropriation for assessment that has been appropriated for the last couple of years, or at least last year, the state will be able to use the savings from that AZ merit contract reduction to pay for these assessments on the menu in the upcoming 2 years, which is great because there had been a time where we were thinking we might have to go to the legislature for a budget ask, but it looks like that's not the case. But I think that always comes up with a caveat in that those were estimates right now, and because the menu is still selection-based and choice-based, it could change. But it's sort of the similar position that we were in last year when at exactly the same time we were like, we think we have the money. The legislature did find some money, but we just have to make sure that we can actually fulfill on that. So the hope is that, yes, this will be fully paid for by the state, which goes to all the equity and access questions that we have had for the last couple of years.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none, then do I have a motion to close rulemaking procedures for R7-2615 No, again, I'm jumping ahead. Do I have a motion to approve the attached updates to the technical guidance, policies, and procedures regarding the high school menu of assessments?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. 5C. Now we'll move on to computer science endorsement. Director Williams.
Vice President, core members of the board, if the board members have any questions in regard to closing this rule, board staff is available to answer those questions. If not, then I would recommend just taking it to a motion.
Very good. Do we have any questions or comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion to close rulemaking procedure R7-2615 regarding computer science endorsement?
So moved.
Second.
And a second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay. Item 5D. Do I have a motion to close rulemaking procedures R7-2303, sex education?
So moved.
First, Member Kay. Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second. Member Burton. Any discussion? Please.
Mr. Vice President Courts, Madam Chairman, or Madam Superintendent, members of the board. Yeah, when we first started looking at the issue, I've struggled with it. I've looked at this and thought a lot about it. And in my own personal experience, I've grown up with discrimination. I know what discrimination is. Our families came from the northern part of Mexico and Chihuahua. We were slaves, and we were freed. We came north. Our family moved into that Duncan area, where the state line is, Arizona, New Mexico, and agricultural workers. And we were wetbacks. That's what we were, wetbacks. It wasn't an agricultural worker, it was anything. It was just, the wetbacks. The Mexicans are the wetbacks. Then you went to school, went to Catholic schools, grade school, then went to Catholic prep school. And I was reminded every day in high school and also Catholic university. I think for those 8 years, I heard the term beaner, wetback, all the derogatory terms. It was every day you hear it. One way of fighting back was fight back, with your fist, with your hands. And I did that, but I also came to a conclusion that wasn't the way. It wasn't going to solve anything. All it did was caused greater divisions. And so I had to come to terms. My parents had to come to terms. Even my family had to come to terms with how do you resolve those issues? I think there were 7 of us out of a school of 800 at Brophy, 7 kids who were of color. 2 of them were my brothers, 2 other Mexican brothers who came from the West Side, and 2 African-American brothers. And that was it. So it was a struggle. It was a learning curve. And the one thing I don't want to see, and I think everybody doesn't want to see, is we don't want to see kids who are harassed. We don't want to see kids who are bullied. We want to see kids who are set aside because of who they are, to hurt them. And I'm going to vote no on this. And the reason I'm going to vote no on it is because I think the structure is wrong. I don't think the intent is wrong. I think everybody's trying to get to the point, how do we live in a society that's pluralistic? How do we learn to talk to each other so that we can appreciate each other's viewpoints? But this is the way I see the construction of the solution. And that is that you have, and I'm going to use you have right now the rule, the legislation that was there. And essentially it says, what's the purpose of intercourse? It's promote monogamous relationship between a man and a woman. And the first step we take is we take that off the table. And once we take that off the table, we brand it as inferior. Like it or not, the message that we send is that view or worldview is it's inferior. It's denigrating. There's something wrong with that. And I think the approach that could have been taken is you have this worldview. We have other different worldviews of what marriage is, of what the purpose of intercourse is. And I don't think we need to run from presenting all these worldviews to students. They should be presented and taught in a way that it should be objective. It should preserve the dignity of every person. And what I do know, though, my life experiences, is that you cannot cure discrimination by then discriminating against another group. And once you take that off the table, like it or not, the faith communities, Mexican community that I belong to, that large number of us, we're in the faith communities. We see it as an attack on what we believe. And I know that's not the intent here, but that's the message that will go out. I know that this is just the first step in the rulemaking that will occur here. But that's not the message I want to send out. But somehow the faith perspective, the view of many Mexicans, in the faith communities, that what we believe in is somehow inferior, because it'll translate out, it'll percolate out, and then when it gets to the classroom, you're going to have some teacher and some administrator who is overly aggressive, and now you're going to have kids who sit in there, and they do believe that. They do believe that marriage and intercourse is monogamous. It is between a man and a woman. and they're going to be made to feel inferior or made to feel bad because they have that perspective. And I know that's not what we want to do. This is not easy. You know, we live in a different society, a pluralistic society, and the only thing that will cure that in the end is that if we struggle with these hard issues through dialogue and respecting each other's points of view, and understand that we're big enough as a society, we're big enough as a state, that we can present all views of what marriage is, of what relationship, intimacy is between human beings. And if you present it in a way that is righteous, that is objective, and that respects all pluralistic views, it will be good. It will, in the end, it'll achieve what we're trying to achieve. And I don't think it does that right now, just the construct. And so I'm going to vote no on it.
Okay.
And respectfully, to all my other colleagues here, understanding the good intentions to resolve this. And I know this is not the end of it, but it's the first step in that.
Thank you, Member Ruiz. Any other comments, Superintendent Hoffman?
Vice President Corr and members of the board, I just wanted to share too that I had received a couple letters about this issue, one from Senator Quesada as well as one from Representative Glisson, and I would love to share those letters with the board. And then I would like to request that we open rulemaking again in June to discuss this further, so we can put all ideas on the table and make sure that we continue to improve upon this.
Other comments? Okay, I have a motion and a second already. So,
Vice President Corr, I have a
yeah,
question.
please, yeah, go ahead.
When we initially were briefed on this issue, and I believe it was in executive session.
Vice President Corr, Member Wellborn, I would strongly suggest if any of the next comments pertain to that executive session, that you cannot state those publicly.
Okay, let me rephrase what I'm going to say then. It's my understanding that this modification to the sex education policy was part of the resolution for the lawsuit. And it was a very targeted type of resolution. There was, as my understanding, that we have not had a full discussion of this policy or the many perspectives that have been shared today. So it seems to me that while there may be a very targeted call for action on this to resolve the lawsuit, that may be an appropriate step. But it also seems that there is interest in taking on the entire policy or standards and having a more thorough review of it. My 2 cents.
Thank you, Member Wellborn. Any other thoughts or comments? So, just to be clear, we have a motion and a second that to the effect of closing rulemaking procedures for R7-2 303 sex education. That's our motion. So with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Oh. Okay, any opposed?
No.
Okay, motion carries. Director Williams, I'd look to you for some guidance on Superintendent Hoffman's request for, does that require, it's not on the agenda, so we really can't, okay. No action to be taken. Noted and thank you. Just want to make sure I'm following what we need to do here. Item 5E, Director Williams.
Vice President Corr, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Item 5E is consideration to determine that Topac Elementary School District Number 12 is in compliance with the USFR and that previously withheld monies that resulted from the determination of noncompliance be returned to the district in the current school year. The board has received some documents in regard to this agenda item. If the board members have any questions in regard to this agenda item, board staff is available. However, I would suggest just take it to a motion because they're in compliance.
Which is great news, which
Great
is fantastic news. Any questions on item 5E? Seeing none, then do I have a motion to determine that Topak is in compliance and that previously withheld monies that resulted from the determination of non-compliance be returned to the district in the current year?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Item 5F, for information only, I believe.
Vice President Corr, members of the board, that is correct. This is information only, and Deputy Director Baden will be taking us through the almost 2019 legislative session wrap-up. And all of you received this on Friday, and then you also have a copy in front of you.
Vice President Corr, Superintendent Hoffman, just very briefly, not to go back on an agenda item, but on the sex ed rule, we didn't receive any public comments, by the way. So usually, if we receive public comments, we'll let you know. If we don't say anything, that usually means we didn't receive any, and in this case, we did not receive any. Just want to make sure we mentioned that.
Thank you.
So for the almost legislative session wrap, we were really hoping that we would be done by today, but such is life. Really, the big thing holding us up right now is the budget, which word is that they're going to drop hopefully today or tomorrow and try to wrap up by the end of the week. But they might still be counting votes today, so we'll see how that turns out. I don't have any special intel on the budget. Sometimes folks ask me and think that I'm in those meetings. I'm not. I don't know what's in there, but you'll be reading it probably at the same time we will be. But once it does drop, if there's anything in there that we feel the board needs to be immediately aware of, we'll send out an alert and let you know, and we might reconvene the legislative committee if something is pressing and needs immediate attention there. So that's pretty much all I have on the budget, hopefully done by the end of this week. Very briefly, I did just want to, if you remember in January, we provided a legislative preview. This was sort of what we thought may be coming this year. And this bullet list is just copied and pasted essentially from that. And if you sort of scan through it, you can see that a lot of the things that we previewed in January at least ended up getting a hearing, if not fully passed into law in many cases. And some of the things that weren't passed, we might see next year. So always repeats when we go from one session to the other. So really what this is intended to do is to sort of give you an idea of what legislation has passed up to this point. We don't really anticipate, outside of the budget, any other policies going through on K-12, mainly because everything we were monitoring has either passed and been chaptered or has died pretty early in the process. So this is probably outside of the budget what we're operating under. And the bullet points here, after summarizing each of these, are important for us because this is what's going to be coming to the board in the coming months in order to comply. So a couple of these that I want to point out, House Bill 2303, which is the third on your list. You'll remember this is some of the guidance that we have to develop with higher education, specifically the Board of Regents and also the 3 universities. So we're going to be working with them over the summer and bringing updates to the board. And really this is a very specific issue that started this, but we think it's a good opportunity to work with higher ed on just broader matriculation issues that we've tried to seek out opportunities to work with higher ed. And this is probably a good opportunity for that. And maybe Superintendent Hoffman would be able to help with that to sort of crosswalk across these boards. Senate Bill 1014 is the ELL SEI block bill. You've already seen action on that, and ADE's OLS team has already held an EL advisory committee that was held last week to start coming up with the framework that will evaluate models that LEAs submit to us. That's something that the board's going to adopt. I think the timeline for that is later this year in December. So they're already starting work on getting together on that, and a pretty productive first meeting last week, and people were pretty excited about it, which is always encouraging. Senate Bill 1071 is the Teacher Evaluation and Principal Framework Bill. This essentially took it off the board and put it down to the LEA level. It also reduced the minimum for how much quantitative data needs to go into those evaluation outcomes. We're working with the field on the best way to move forward here. We, at the very least, will take this off our website as the required framework from which LEAs have to work on. However, we're going to work with our partners at ASA and ASBA to see if they have, and the Charter Association, to see if they have a tool that they would like to develop and share with the field, and if that's something they would like us to share as well on our website, if they would like us to be partners on that, or if they want to take the lead. We want to make sure that LEAs still have a resource available to them, but I think the legislation was pretty clear that the field would take the lead on this, and so we want to see if they have an instrument that they have in mind that they want to provide as a template, and what our role, if any, would be in helping disseminate that. The Fine Arts Proficiency Seal, this is a diploma seal similar to those other diploma seals that we've seen. ADE's folks have already done a lot of work on coming up with the requirements for that. So there will probably be a subsequent meeting, and then a rule will come back to us, go through the regular rulemaking process. Similar to Senate Bill 1177, that'll be something that the board will have to open rulemaking on. It'll be a pretty straightforward rule change, but anything special ed related usually opens up a lot of other boxes that we might have to investigate. But at least one small rule change will be required in our special education vouchers rules to ensure that the home school district also includes charter schools. And then a few other things here. I won't go into too many details on these. You know, on the 1346, you already saw the assessment stuff that we've already been working on that. Senate Bill 1318 is probably something that the ad hoc committee, the K-3 literacy ad hoc committee, is going to want to take a deeper look into. We had some concerns that we expressed with that legislation that was still put into practice. There's a delayed effective date essentially on some of those requirements. So those are things that we're going to want to work on. We have time now that the ad hoc can take a closer look at. Senate Bill 1256 is a rehash of going back to the original statute after last year's addition of change in the budget. So we'll take our rule back to where it was 2 years ago in order to conform to that statutory change. And that is pretty much it. These other bills on the list are things that we've been monitoring and certainly affect our work, but not something that requires immediate board action. But this is essentially the list that staff is going to use as we work through the interim to make sure we're doing what we need to be doing to comply with statute. And then, of course, the budget will add some additional things to that list, most likely. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and this is probably the last legislative update you will get outside of the budget.
Promise? Any questions for Deputy Director Baden?
I have a comment.
Superintendent Hoffman, sure.
President, core members of the board. Just a quick comment, because I had heard from some educators and school leaders that they were asking me where could they find a list kind of like this, not this exact list, because this is more specific to action taken by the board, but some people were asking me, some school leaders were saying, where can we find a list of all the things that passed and what we need to be aware of? And so I've been talking with my communications and policy team to find a way to put a list together that then we can put out on our website or social media and things like that. So just wanted to put that out there here too, that I think this is really good information for everyone to have.
Yeah, Vice President Corr and Superintendent Hoffman, absolutely. And I think ASA and ASBA probably have some resources too, but trying to get it all centralized is great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Ketcher. Moving on to 6, do we have any? Have we received any requests to speak at this point, Director Williams?
Vice President, core members of the board, we have not.
Thank you. So then I would ask, do we have a motion to approve the enforcement action consent items? So I would look for a motion to approve items 7A, 1 through 5.
So move.
Member Baker.
Second.
Yeah, because they just already called the Vice President Core, we have a.
This for later. This for the next one.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Never mind. Continue with your motion. I apologize.
Continue? Okay, thank you. And I believe I have a motion and a second to approve the 5 items of the consent agenda. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Now, 8, in general session, certification enforcement actions. Do we have any requests to speak to these items?
Vice
Director
President,
Williams.
Vice President Corby, we have one, Jose Ibarra.
Thank you.
Vice President Coors, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm here to speak on behalf of my certification that's being looked about today. I'm here to say that I want to continue being a teacher. I've seen the progress that I've made with my students when I was teaching, with even just little steps that I saw them grow into something more. As a special education teacher, I don't see the labels that many people do see them as. I see them as just the children they are. And that's what I want to continue doing. I want to become a teacher that shows that not just the general people, but just the kids themselves show that they don't need to be seen as their labels. They are more than that. So I wanted to say that I want to continue with my study as I want to continue as a teacher. So I hope that during the discussion for my certification that you approve it, and if you do, I appreciate that greatly. Right. I'm not much of a excellent talker, but I'm an honest one. And I would appreciate it greatly if you would look into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ibarra. That's it, Director Williams? Thank you. So we have traditionally taken these items as a single motion, but if there's a reason to not do that, I'm open. Seeing none, then I would.
Vice President Core? Vice President Core, it's Luke.
Yeah. President Narducci, please.
Thank you very much. I just was looking at 9A2. I'm sorry, 9A. Which one is it? 9A2. James Hitz. I was just wondering if we could get a little further information on his case and what the actual recommendation is when we accept the negotiated settlement. And my concern, just so you know, my concern is repeated offenses from 2005, 6, 7, 11, all involving aggressive behavior. Two incidents of delinquency of a minor, and then even the last one in 11 involves malicious mischief and extensive damage, which indicates to me a situation of aggressive behavior and questionable behavior for a classroom. And he just received his degree in December of 2017. He has 2 letters of reference, both from family members, but he also has some domestic violence issues, I think, that were identified. And the family members are his son and his wife. So that just presented some concerns for me, and I just want to know what the impact is of us approving the recommendation.
Thank you, President Narducci. Director Williams?
Vice President Core, President Narducci, members of the board, if the board chooses to approve the negotiated settlement for Mr. Hitz, then he would be certified for certification, because this is to the NSA is to approve the application for certification with the condition that if he is arrested for or charged with driving under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or any intoxicant within 5 years, it's an automatic revocation. And Vice President Core, oh, you're welcome.
Go ahead, Director Williams. Did you have?
And we do have, I believe it was Kathleen. Were you the one that wrote this one?
I did.
Kathleen is available for any questions.
Please, go ahead.
It's the Assistant Attorney General's office.
A couple of other clarifications. Yes, there is the pattern of domestic violence, and the child involved was his particular child. When he was younger, he went back to his ex-wife, and they got in arguments. The arguments were in front of the child. That's where the allegation is. It was not any allegation of abuse directed at that child. I want to be clear about that. I had numerous conversations with Mr. Hitz. He's very committed, at least in the conversations with me by phone, to becoming a teacher and to basically make up for some of the bad choices that he made earlier. He's committed to being sober, and he's very proud of the fact that he's been maintaining sobriety. So the last incident would have been 2011. That was the DUI. He ran into a house. He has paid for that, and he in each of those situations he pled guilty too. So I don't know if that puts it a little bit better in context, but I'd be happy to respond further from reviewing the records.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, Member Baker.
Do we have information as to how long he has been sober?
He has been sober since after 2011. That's when he committed to sobriety. He also, one more point is, one of those letters of recommendation is from his ex-wife. And it's a pretty powerful letter, attesting to the fact that they really went through some tough times, particularly co-parenting that child and with his substance abuse problems. But she's recommending heavily that he's a changed man and that he should be given another chance.
President Narducci, do you wish to have this voted on separately?
Yes, please.
Okay. We'll take 9A2 out. Does anyone wish to have any 9A1, 3, or 4 pulled out separately? Okay, hearing none, then I will look for a motion to approve items 9A, 1, 3, and 5, 1, 3, and 4.
So moved.
Member Wellborn,
I'll second.
and a second. Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Back separately to 9A2. Any additional questions or conversation regarding James Hitz? Then I would look for a separate motion to approve 9A2.
So moved.
Member Wellborn?
Second.
Member Baker as a second. One last chance. Any questions, conversation? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
This is Luke. No.
Thank you, President Narducci. Motion passes. Moving on to 9B, Director Williams.
Vice President Core, members of the board, if any members have any questions pertaining to item 9B, I'll be more than willing to answer those for you. But if not, then I would suggest taking it to a motion.
Any questions? All right, seeing and hearing none, do I have a motion to adapt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendations of the PPAC to approve the application for certification of Johnetta Carter?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any questions or comments? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. And my personal favorite part of the agenda, the summary of current events, future meetings, dates, and items for future agendas. Do we have any such information to share, Director Williams?
Vice President Core, I do not.
Does
I thought your favorite
anyone
part
else?
was,
Yeah, please.
I thought
yeah.
your favorite part was the superintendent's report. So I am feeling very offended.
It's a very close. It's like trying to pick between you and Big Red. It's very close. I love them both.
Depends on how long your report is.
They're going to get longer now.
Vice President Core, I do want to point out that now you have had an hour and 24-minute meeting, and President Narducci has had an hour and a half meeting. So President Narducci's going to have to, he's no longer in the first, you know.
Let this be an inspiration to you, President Narducci.
Thank you.
With hearing no announcements and whatnot, then I will adjourn this meeting at looks like 11:23. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
No.
No.
Just adjourn.
Well, I've just done it. Okay, we get to go home. Thank you very much.
Just a reminder, there's lunch. It'll be here between 11:30 and 11:45, and cake.
Fantastic. Thank you so
can't
much.
go home.
Everyone else has left the call.